In the quiet town of Greenfield, located in the heart of the United States, where everyone knows each other by name and secrets are a rarity, life followed an almost predictable rhythm. At the center of this community was Dr. Michael Harris, a physician whose impeccable reputation and tireless dedication to his profession made him a figure admired by all. He was the example of perfection, both in his professional and personal life. Married to Sarah, a devoted and loving wife, and father to a teenage daughter named Emily, Michael's life seemed like one of those perfect stories everyone wants to live. Greenfield, with its tree-lined streets and houses with historic facades, seemed to be a place where the problems of big cities would never reach. The atmosphere of tranquility that hovered over the city made its residents believe that they were immune to the dramas and dangers of the outside world. But, as in any community, there was an unspoken, almost imperceptible feeling that something was about to happen, a subtle malaise, like a silent storm approaching on the horizon, threatened to break the calm of that city. Michael Harris was known not only for his medical skill, but also for his charisma and the way he treated his patients. He prided himself on being someone everyone could trust, and many in Greenfield saw him as a pillar of the community. His long hours in the office were often cited as a sign of his unwavering commitment to the health and well-being of his patients. However, there was a mystery surrounding these extra hours that Michael spent at work, something that, over time, began to raise suspicions among the most attentive. Could the devoted doctor be hiding something? Sarah, in turn, has always been seen as the ideal wife. She was the kind of woman everyone admired. Always present, always supportive. The kind of wife everyone believed was the foundation of a perfect family. However, recently, something seemed different about Sarah. She began to show signs of nervousness, an anxiety that did not go unnoticed by the more observant neighbors. People noticed how his hand shook slightly as he greeted people he knew on the street, or how his smile seemed more forced, less spontaneous. Sarah, who once exuded confidence, now seemed to be carrying an invisible burden, something that was eating her up inside. Emily, the couple's daughter, was an ordinary teenager in everyone's eyes. But in his stillness, there was a keen intelligence and an ability to observe the world around him with an insight that few adults possess. She adored her parents and always believed her family was perfect. However, as the days went by, Emily began to notice small changes in her parents' behavior. There was an uncomfortable silence during family dinners, whispered conversations that ended abruptly when she entered the room, and most unsettlingly, a name that began to come up frequently: Jessica. Jessica, a woman Emily barely knew, began to become a constant presence in their conversations. Whenever the name was mentioned, discomfort took over the house. Their parents exchanged nervous glances, and the atmosphere in the previously harmonious home began to deteriorate. Emily felt like something was wrong, but she wasn't sure what it was. She just felt, deep in her heart, that whatever was happening could forever change the life she knew. Thus, beneath the calm surface of Greenfield, a drama began to unfold that would shake the foundations of that city seemingly immune to the world's problems. A drama that involved secrets, suspicions, and a web of relationships that, once revealed, would leave deep scars. Michael Harris, the devoted doctor and exemplary husband; Sarah, the perfect wife who was now battling her own demons; and Emily, the observant daughter who was beginning to piece together a disturbing puzzle, were all about to be swept up in a current of events that no one could predict. And at the center of it all, an enigmatic figure, Jessica. Who was she really? And why did his name cause so much discomfort in the Harris family? These questions hung in the air, bringing with them a feeling of inevitability, as if fate had already sealed what was to come. What was about to happen in Greenfield would forever change the lives of its residents, revealing that even in the quietest of towns, the darkest secrets have a way of coming to light. That night, the silence in the Harris household seemed deeper than usual. Sarah Harris was used to her husband's long work hours, but something that night bothered her differently. Michael hadn't heard anything since he left for the office that morning. The hours dragged on, and the clock showed 10 at night when Sarah decided she couldn't wait any longer. He picked up the phone and called the office, expecting to hear Michael's familiar voice, but the phone rang several times with no answer. A feeling of uneasiness came over her, a mix of worry and fear that made her heart beat faster. Determined to find out what was happening, Sarah grabbed her car keys and left the house towards her husband's office. As he drove through the quiet streets of Greenfield, his mind raced with thoughts of all the possibilities. Maybe he was so busy that he simply hadn't heard the phone. Maybe he had an emergency and left in a hurry. However, these explanations did not calm the whirlwind of emotions within her. As she approached the city center, Sarah noticed something that made her slow down the car. Parked in front of a local bar was Michael's car. Sarah's heart quickened. What would he be doing there at this hour? Determined to find out the truth, she parked and entered the bar. The room was dimly lit, and the sound of conversations and laughter filled the air. That's when she spotted Michael, sitting at a table in the back, chatting animatedly with an attractive young woman. Sarah recognized it immediately. It was Jessica. The sight of her husband with another woman, laughing and seemingly relaxed, aroused in Sarah an overwhelming feeling of jealousy. She felt her blood boil as she walked towards the table, unable to control the anger rising within her. As he approached, Michael looked up, and his smile instantly disappeared when he saw Sarah's expression. Without thinking twice, she confronted her husband, her words filled with frustration and pain. Jessica, sitting nearby, remained surprisingly calm, which only served to irritate Sarah further. The entire bar seemed to have stopped to watch the scene that was quickly becoming the talk of the town. Michael, visibly uncomfortable, tried to explain the situation. He said that he had met Jessica by chance and that they were just talking, but the words sounded empty to Sarah. The tension between the two increased every second, and Sarah, consumed by the idea of betrayal, could no longer listen to her husband's explanations. In her mind, the picture became increasingly clear. Michael was involved with Jessica in a way that went beyond friendship. This thought devastated her, and the idea that her marriage was in shambles made her despair. While Sarah dealt with her suspicions and raw emotions, Emily, her daughter, began to realize that something very serious was happening to her parents. In the days following that night, Emily noticed how their behavior had become more distant, their conversations more tense, their looks more evasive. Determined to understand what was happening, she began to observe more closely, paying attention to details that she would not have noticed before. It was then that Emily, looking through her father's cell phone in a moment of curiosity, found messages that seemed to confirm her worst fears. They were conversations between Michael and Jessica, much more intimate in tone than any conversation she had ever seen between her parents. The messages were full of innuendo, memories of previous meetings, and promises of more moments together. Emily's heart sank, and she realized she was facing a terrible truth, something that could destroy her family. Not knowing who to turn to, Emily decided to investigate on her own. She began to piece together a puzzle that became darker and more disturbing every day. The small details that previously went unnoticed now made sense, forming a picture of betrayal and secrets that could change everything. The young woman felt alone in this discovery, afraid of what might happen if she confronted her parents with the truth that was beginning to emerge. As the conflict intensified within the Harris home, Greenfield's apparent tranquility was just a facade for the emotional storms unfolding in silence. Sarah, consumed by suspicion, and Michael, trying desperately to keep up appearances, were locked in a dangerous game of distrust and secrets. Emily, in turn, was about to discover that sometimes the truth can be more devastating than any lie. And so the small town of Greenfield, where secrets were rare, was about to be rocked by a scandal that no one could predict, but that everyone would remember for a long time. Night fell silently over Greenfield, and the town's usual tranquility seemed to hide the omen of something terrible. The next morning, that feeling would become a grim reality. Michael Harris's body was found in his office, his life tragically cut short. The scene was disturbing. Signs of a struggle were everywhere, indicating that he had faced his last moments with desperation. The small town, which rarely saw any violence, was shaken to its roots. The news spread quickly, leaving everyone in a state of shock and disbelief. How could this have happened to someone so respected and loved? The police began their investigation immediately, and all eyes turned to Sarah, the grieving wife. She was a visibly shaken woman, still trying to process the horror of what had occurred. When questioned, Sarah did not deny that she had argued with Michael the night before his death. She told investigators about the fight they had, a heated fight that arose from the distrust that had developed between them. However, Sarah swore she had nothing to do with her husband's death. Even so, his emotional instability, the nervousness evident in every answer he gave, began to raise suspicions. Could this woman, who everyone believed was the perfect wife, be involved in something so terrible? The detectives, determined to uncover the truth, turned their attention to someone else who seemed to be at the center of this maelstrom. Jessica. The young woman was called to testify, and unlike Sarah, she showed a coldness that bothered the investigators. She categorically denied any romantic involvement with Michael, insisting that they were just friends and co-workers. However, her lack of emotion when talking about Michael's death caused palpable discomfort. Who in their right mind would be so indifferent to the tragic fate of someone so close to them? Jessica's attitude, so calm and controlled, made the police suspicious. Could she be hiding something? As the investigation continued, everyone's image of Michael Harris began to crumble. The secrets he had kept hidden for so long began to come to light, revealing a side of his life that few knew about. It turned out that he had been involved in an extramarital relationship with Jessica for months, and it wasn't just a passing fling. The two were deeply involved and even planned to run away together, leaving their lives and responsibilities in Greenfield behind. The shock of this revelation resonated throughout the city, transforming everyone's respect for Michael into a mix of anger and disillusionment. How could he betray his family and friends like that? As the details of the case unfolded, Emily, Michael, and Sarah's teenage daughter struggled to understand what was happening. Her father's death was hard enough, but now, with the revelation of his betrayal, Emily's world seemed to fall apart. She felt like she needed to do something, understand what had really happened. So, in a moment of courage mixed with desperation, she decided to search her father's office, looking for anything that could help her put the pieces of this puzzle together. It was there, among Michael's documents and personal effects, that Emily found something that changed everything. It was a series of letters and messages exchanged between Michael and Jessica, where they spoke openly about their escape plans and how Jessica was increasingly impatient. Jessica's words were full of urgency, almost desperate, as if she were pressuring Michael to make a decision he wasn't ready to make. Even more disturbing, Emily found a message from Jessica sent the night Michael died. in which he threatened to end everything if he didn't keep his promise. These shocking discoveries left Emily in a moral dilemma. She knew that this evidence could incriminate Jessica, but she also knew that revealing these secrets would mean further destroying the image she had of her father. However, the desire for justice prevailed. Emily decided to take the evidence to the police, believing that, despite everything, the truth needed to be revealed. With the new evidence, investigators began to seriously consider the possibility that Jessica could have killed Michael in an act of desperation or revenge, especially if he was trying to back away from the plans they had made together. Greenfield, a town that once seemed immune to the dramas plaguing the rest of the world, now found itself in the middle of a complex and painful investigation. People who once admired Michael Harris now questioned everything about him. Sarah, who was being consumed by grief and guilt, began to realize that her husband was not the man she thought she knew. And Jessica, with her facade of calm and control, now found herself cornered by the evidence that could convict her. Emily, for her part, felt caught between the desire to protect her father's memory and the need to ensure justice was served. The case took an unexpected turn, and the truth, so difficult to face, finally began to emerge. But at what cost? Greenfield would never be the same. The image of perfection that the city had maintained for so long had been shattered, and the secrets that came to light left deep scars on everyone involved. The chaos in Greenfield reached its peak when police, acting under the weight of suspicion, arrested Sarah Harris. The news spread through the city like an uncontrollable wildfire, leaving residents divided between those who believed in the innocence of the woman who had always been seen as a devoted wife, and those who were convinced that Sarah, driven by anger and jealousy, had been responsible for the death of her husband. What was once a united city has turned into a place of murmurs and suspicious looks. Sarah, who was already weakened by the tragedy, now found herself isolated, struggling to maintain her sanity as she was drawn into an increasingly deeper nightmare. While Sarah faced the charges, Emily, her daughter, refused to believe that her mother could have committed such an act. Determined to prove Sarah's innocence, Emily confronted Jessica, the woman at the center of this whole mess. Arming herself with the evidence she had found in her father's office, Emily approached Jessica with a courage she herself didn't know she possessed. When the two finally came face to face, the tension was palpable. Jessica, normally so cold and calculating, now found herself cornered by the young woman who demanded answers. The truth Jessica had guarded so carefully began to crumble under the pressure of the evidence Emily presented. Jessica, in a moment of desperation, revealed that she actually had a plan to run away with Michael. They had planned everything, but at the last moment, Michael hesitated, giving up on the escape and provoking Jessica's wrath. She confessed that Michael's refusal to abandon everything to be with her made her furious, causing her to do something she could never undo. Desperate to save her mother, Emily decided the next step was to take the evidence she had to the police. She knew this was her only chance to free Sarah from unjust imprisonment, and with a heavy heart, she turned the evidence over to the authorities. As the police deepened their investigation based on information provided by Emily, suspicions surrounding Jessica began to solidify. Witnesses who had previously been hesitant to get involved began to come forward, reporting seeing Jessica in suspicious situations with Michael. These testimonies, along with the evidence collected, created an increasingly incriminating picture against Jessica. Realizing that she was cornered and that the siege around her was rapidly closing, Jessica made a drastic decision. With the desperation of someone who knows that time is running out, she tried to escape the city that now saw her as a criminal. But his plan was thwarted. The police, already on high alert, captured her before she could escape. In the interrogation that followed, Jessica finally broke down. She admitted that, in a moment of uncontrollable anger, she had attacked Michael, although she insisted that she had no intention of killing him, but rather of making him understand how much she had destroyed his life. Her words rang hollow in the face of the tragedy she had caused. With Jessica's confession, the case finally went to trial. The courtroom was packed, filled with Greenfield residents who yearned for closure to the nightmare that had turned their sleepy town into a hotbed of scandal. Jessica, once proud and confident, now found herself in a vulnerable position, faced with the consequences of her actions. The jury, after hearing all the testimony and considering all the evidence, had no difficulty in reaching a verdict. Jessica was convicted of the murder of Michael Harris. The judge, in his sentencing, spoke about how obsession and desperation can lead to irreparable tragedies, words that echoed through the courtroom, bringing a sense of closure to those seeking justice. As Jessica was taken away to serve her sentence, the town of Greenfield began to breathe again, albeit still under the weight of sadness and disillusionment. News of the conviction brought some relief, but the scars left by recent events would take time to heal. Sarah, now free from the charges, was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. She and Emily, who had been through hell together, were trying to rebuild their lives, a task that seemed monumental in light of everything they had lost. The tragedy that befell the Harises served as a grim reminder to Greenfield residents that even in the quietest communities, secrets and passions can be devastating forces. Sarah and Emily, although forever scarred by what happened, supported each other in hopes of finding some kind of peace and redemption in the future. And as the city slowly returned to normal, memories of those dark days remained, a painful reminder that true danger often comes from where you least expect it. After weeks of uncertainty and anguish, Sarah was finally released from prison. The evidence presented by her daughter Emily and the investigations that followed had exonerated Sarah of any involvement in the terrible crime that claimed her husband's life. The news of her release should have been a relief. But for Sarah, freedom brought with it a devastating new reality. Michael was dead, and despite all the mistakes he made, the pain of loss was unbearable. Furthermore, Sarah now faced the social repercussions of the entire affair. The city that previously welcomed her as one of its own now saw her with looks of distrust, pity, and even judgment. She became the woman whose name was associated with one of the biggest scandals in Greenfield history, and that was something she would have to carry. Emily, on the other hand, despite the deep pain of losing her father, felt intense relief upon knowing that her mother was innocent. The uncertainty that had hung over them during the weeks of investigation had been suffocating, and now, finally, the truth was exposed. Emily, with her youth and resilience, became a pillar of strength for Sarah. She knew they needed to keep going, and that her mother needed her more than ever. Determined to help Sarah overcome the pain and find a way forward, Emily stood firm by her side, offering support and encouragement every step of the way. Emily's role within the family changed drastically, and the girl who once looked to her parents for guidance now took on the responsibility of being her mother's emotional anchor. As Sarah and Emily struggled to rebuild their lives, the town of Greenfield was also trying to heal. The scandal involving Dr. Michael Harris left an indelible mark on the community. People who once saw Greenfield as a haven of tranquility now knew that even the most peaceful places can hide dark secrets. Michael's case has become a constant reminder that no one is truly safe from their own weaknesses and the devastating consequences they can bring. Although the city tried to return to its usual routine, the shadow of what happened remained present, an invisible but palpable scar that reminded everyone that evil can hide in the most unexpected places. Meanwhile, Jessica, now serving her sentence for Michael's murder, had plenty of time to reflect on the choices that led her there. His obsession with Michael, fueled by anger and despair at seeing his plans fall apart, culminated in an irreversible act. In the silence of the cell, she pondered how the insane search for unrequited love and the frustration of not getting what she wanted had destroyed not only Michael's life, but hers as well. Jessica's story became a grim example of what despair can do to a person, a painful lesson in the dangers of losing oneself to intense, uncontrollable emotions. His life, which could have followed a completely different path, now served as a warning to others who might find themselves in similar situations. With the trial over and the case resolved, Sarah and Emily realized they couldn't stay in Greenfield. The city, with all its painful memories and constant reminder of what had happened, no longer offered the comforts of home. Together, mother and daughter made the difficult decision to leave the city and seek a new start elsewhere. Although the pain of the loss and trauma they experienced accompanied them, both were determined to find a new meaning in their lives. They knew the road ahead would be difficult, but they believed that together they could rebuild what was destroyed. Upon his departure, there was a mix of sadness and hope. They were leaving behind the city that for so long was synonymous with happiness, but now only brought memories of pain. At the same time, they were searching for the possibility of a different future, where they could finally find the peace they so desired. Sarah and Emily, united by tragedy but strengthened by love and resilience, were ready to face the unknown, determined to transform their pain into a new opportunity in life. And so, as their car drove away along the roads that left Greenfield behind, the promise of a new beginning shone on the horizon, offering a chance for healing and renewal. The small town of Greenfield, once a haven of tranquility and community, will never be the same after the terrible tragedy that shook its foundations. The case that exposed a deadly love triangle involving Dr. Michael Harris, his wife Sarah, and the enigmatic Jessica left deep scars on everyone who lived to tell the tale. People who once took pride in the peace and security of Greenfield now find themselves forced to face the harsh reality that not even the darkest secrets can stay hidden forever. What was once a united and happy community now carries the weight of a past marked by lies, betrayal, and violence. Appearances, as everyone has painfully learned, can be extremely deceiving. Dr. Michael Harris, who for years was seen as a good man, an example to be followed, had his true nature revealed in a shocking way. His affair with Jessica, the young woman who led him into a spiral of deceit and eventually his death, proved that even the most seemingly perfect lives can hide deep shadows. The revelation of Michael's extramarital relationship and the escape plans he and Jessica were preparing shattered the city's image of him. What was once admiration turned into a bitter mix of anger and disappointment, as everyone began to question how well they really knew the people around them. Sarah, who was wrongly accused of involvement in her husband's death, now carries in her heart not only the pain of loss, but also the scars of the hasty judgment of her neighbors and friends. The woman who was once seen as the perfect wife and mother has become a tragic figure, marked by suffering that no amount of time can completely erase. However, despite everything she suffered, Sarah emerged from this experience stronger, more resilient. With Emily by her side, she was able to find the strength to carry on, even when it felt like the world had fallen in on her. Sarah now knows that the road to healing will be long and full of obstacles, but she also understands that life, even in the midst of tragedy, offers opportunities to start over. Emily, the young woman who saw her life turn upside down so abruptly, also came out of this experience more mature and aware of the world around her. The girl who once lived a peaceful and protected life was forced to grow up quickly, facing truths that no daughter should have to face. However, amidst the chaos, Emily discovered an inner strength she never knew she possessed. She became her mother's support, the anchor that kept Sarah from being lost in the sea of sadness and pain. Together, mother and daughter formed an even stronger bond, a connection that, although forged in suffering, gave them the courage to seek a new beginning. As Sarah and Emily prepare to leave Greenfield in search of a future less burdened with painful memories, the town slowly tries to return to normalcy. However, for the residents, nothing will ever be the same. The scandal involving Dr. Michael Harris is a constant reminder that things are not always what they seem. Greenfield, once a symbol of stability and security, now serves as an example of how fragile the facade of everyday life can be. The dark events that shook the city have become a kind of local legend, a story that will be told and retold, always with a mix of horror and fascination. But life, despite everything, goes on. People try to move on, to erase the scars. But the shadow of what happened will always be there, hovering silently over the once peaceful streets. The case of Michael Harris is not just a story about crime and tragedy. It's a lesson in human nature, about how desperation and obsession can lead to irreversible consequences. It's also a reminder that secrets, no matter how well kept, have a way of surfacing, often at a devastating cost. Sarah and Emily leave Greenfield with heavy hearts, but an unwavering determination to find a place where they can rebuild their lives. They know that the road ahead will be long and full of challenges, but they also believe that together, they can overcome any obstacle. What they went through doesn't define who they are, but it transformed them into stronger people, more aware of their own capabilities. And so, as their car disappears down the road, leaving Greenfield behind, there is a sense of hope that despite everything, it is still possible to find peace and start again.